I'm excited today to share one of my favorite stories in the Bible. But now I realize that, in fact, now I just got a whole different revelation of it. So today we're sharing the stories from 2 Samuel 11 to 12 and also First Chronicles 20, which is basically the story of David and Bathsheba. Now, it was revealed differently to me this time, and I realized that I had romanticized this story all my life, and partly because of my admiration for David, that the gravity of what he did in this story was totally lost on me. Now let me share. So first off, David had already started to show signs of complacency. I believe that that's what, where all his issues began. What do I mean? So after conquering, because where we left off in the last time, they had defeated the, Moabites, well, the Syrians. They had dealt with the Syrians, who were the Moabites mercenaries, the Ammonites mercenaries, sorry. And, now his men were off fighting the Ammonites, and David was at home relaxing, right? Once a great king, a great warrior who led his men into battle. He was at home while his men went to finish the battle with the Ammonites that God had given, giving them victory over their Syrians. He really epitomized the saying where it says, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. Because why wasn't David at battle? Why was he strolling in his roof in the middle of the day to see a lady bathing and sending for her? Yeah, I think that was the key thing that actually had flown over my head before. Now Bathsheba, I've come to realize, was a victim of David's desires. He saw her, demanded that she be brought to him to satisfy his sexual urges. David was king and had a harem full of women, but she was a married woman, and whose husband was away fighting for his king and his country. The very same person he was fighting for was sending for her and actually now sleeps with her. There's discussions how this wasn't consensual, and I mean, whether it was consensual or not, there was an imbalance of power. As far as I was concerned, it was sexual harassment because David was a king. Do you say no to the king? You know what I mean? So yeah, that's made me think about it in a different way, and I got to put myself in her shoes for the first time and imagined all that she must have gone through, possibly rape, pregnancy as a result, and then widowhood that she was probably aware of, like she knew what I mean. I just imagine her sitting at home and coming to hear that her husband had died. It would have been too coincidental. So she knew. And then a loss of a child. That's a lot. It's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to process. And for once, my focus was away from David and on Bathsheba in this instance. The prophet Nathan wisely painted the picture for David, and it wasn't pretty. What stood out for me was God's disappointment in verse 8, where he said, all that he had given to David, and even all of where he said all the things he had given to David, and then he added, and if all this had not been enough, had been too little, I would have given you much more. It's just like disappointment for a parent, like maybe a child. Like, I thought about how, like rich kids will go to school and go and steal something small, and the father is like, are you kidding me? I could have given you everything. Why would you go and steal and bring this shame onto the name when anything you wanted I could give? I felt like that's how, God felt. It was very heartbreaking to hear that from God, who had been nothing but gracious and merciful to David. I think about it for myself. Like when I disappoint God, to be able to know that he'll feel like, listen, what is this that you're doing? I would have given you just much more. David must have felt terrible. Now, even through that, God put away his sin, as it said in verse 13. He saved him from the consequence of his sin, which was death, because it was adultery and murder, but there were grave repercussions and consequences for his household. and we'll see all of that play out. But then basically David, even though forgiven, there were, you know, consequences to what he had done. It's heartwarming still that David mourned and fasted even after, you know, God had said everything, until the child died. He still hoped for mercy, but understood God enough to accept his will when the child died, and he stopped his mourning. Meanwhile, Joab had probably had it with David being MIA, you know, and all his antiques. And if he hadn't even gotten a wind, I mean, even if the people in the war hadn't gotten a wind of what was going on, because imagine Uriah coming back with his own death warrant, word must have gotten around. But anyway, you know, the message Joab sent to David jolted him into action, because Joab was like, listen, I'm about to take this land, and if I do, I'll name it after myself, because I'm sure to him it was weird that his king wouldn't even be there, you know. And in spite of all the drama and the sin that you know what, warranted defeat, God came through for them and gave them victory over the Ammonites, and they captured Rabbah. And Rabbah, I found out, was modern day Ammon. And today, and I actually just made the connection, Ammon, Ammonites. So that's the same. So I was in Ammonite territory last year, guys. How exciting was that? So here's what I found out about God. In Psalm 35, it says, for his anger is for a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. God is generous with his mercy. David just shows us so. In spite of the end, in spite of everything that he did, you know, God didn't give him what he deserved. And even though the child conceived in the midst of all of this sin and drama died, they had a son afterwards, Solomon. Solomon became the wisest and the richest king to ever live. You know, so that, I mean, if that's not restoration, I don't know what it is. So I'd leave this with you. Don't count yourself out because of your past mistakes. God still has plans for you. Thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow we'll go back to the Psalms and read the Psalms that kind of connect to this. So it's Psalms 32, 51, 86, and 122. See you here. Have a good day. Bye.